roll call, please.
Mayor Rose,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Young,
Here.
Councilmember Bentley,
Here.
Councilmember Ditmore, Councilmember Bachelor,
Here.
Councilmember Frampus,
Here.
Councilmember McDowell.
Please note that Councilman Frampus is attending by phone tonight. All right, well, tonight's budget workshop is our second in a series. And as everybody knows, the budget is a exercise to figure out how we want to spend our resources to help our residents, and probably the most important thing that we do. So I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, and we'll continue where we left off last time.
Thank you, Mayor, for that good introduction. You had your first workshop 2 weeks ago, and we started to put some things up on the board that look like there'll be priorities for the city council to make sure that staff works into the proposed budget as we develop it. And so I took those things and put them on the list. They're shown on page 4-2 of your staff report, the workshop, but I thought I'd go through each one of those individually so that there could be as much discussion as the council would like to have on each item. So the first item, there was a lot of discussion about the desire for improving our parks. And after we acquired West Melbourne Community Park from Brevard County, we went through a thoughtful master planning process with a planning and landscape architect firm. And we vetted that through a focus group, which a lot of businesses use focus groups. We vetted it through the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and then through the City Council, where the council ultimately determined all the component parts of what that park would be. We coordinated with the Space Coast Field of Dreams and Promise and Brevard for their portions to make sure that they integrated seamlessly. And in fact, I think it's been a great success. We had no idea when we adopted the master plan how we were going to raise $12 million, but we knew it was a good plan. And so with a lot of help from our not-for-profit partners from the state of Florida and from the city council allocating some local dollars, which were pretty precious in those days, we were able to be successful. And if you compare that initial master plan with what got built, it's almost identical. The only thing that's different is there is an additional restroom located between the skate park and the field, the performance lawn. But other than that, it's a very true delivery of the master plan. And so from the discussion from the last meeting, my suggestion is that we actually do that same process, but for all of our parks, so that we can have a master plan of improvements for each one of our city parks. Some can be developed more intensely, others are probably not going to be as intensely developed. But by having a master plan for the whole park, then the council, over however many years it might take, you could certainly do one park at a time and bring it up to your current vision of what our park should be. So one of the things we would want the consultant to look at would be all the things that the council listed at the first budget workshop. Spectator stands for the skate park, 4 pickleball courts, replacement dog park, adding parking at selected parks, new park jogging, walking trails, which could provide some interconnectivity between parks, and a new senior community center. So we would have the consultant look at all those plus other things that could come up through the process. But I did talk with Mel Scott, who is a principal with the firm that did the work for us, the same landscape architect that worked on our park is still with the firm. They've actually beefed up that part of the business, and so we're going to get a budget level estimate for what that kind of master plan would take. Now, obviously, we can use the funds that developers have contributed in lieu of dedicating land for park or building on their own property a small public park. And so that's an eligible use of those funds. And so we would use what we call our 103 fund, our park fund for that purpose. So wanted to have the council spend some time about a proposed master plan for all of our city parks.
I'll pipe in first. I think overall that's a good plan. I just don't want to wait years before that's completed, before we move to do certain things in the current parks, whether we're talking pickleball, whether we're talking extended maintenance and those kind of things that we need to do either way, with or without a thing. I know that I talk about sometimes the identity of the city of West Melbourne, and I think our parks and certain things like that really stand out. The Field of Dreams, of course, everybody knows about that. That's just one of the many things that's attractive that we put a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of resources into. So I just want to let's talk about the Field of Dreams, that whole park. One of the things is I think the Field of Dreams is very underutilized right now. Of course, it was closed down with COVID for a long time. The ball fields are relatively empty most of the time. The soccer, the basketball, the baseball's empty. The playground is well used all the time, I think. But I think that's getting a little stale too. I know we advertise it for the special needs, but there's a lot of special needs that are the adults in the family, or as they grow, and they don't want to always swing on the swing set. So it'd be nice to have something in that park to bring some other things out. And I don't know exactly all the things that would help that population. We do have some place over there inside the playground area, whether you I know they used to have that game where you had a pole and you had a ball. You can hit that by yourself around and around. I don't know what that's.
Tetherball.
Tetherball. It's before my time, so I've heard of that. Other things that.
I was a sixth grade champ in tetherball.
I saw your trophy.
The only trophy I ever won in anything athletic.
Other things, you can do some simple things like draw lines on the concrete and call Foursquare, or what's the other game called, hopscotch, and some of those things that kids can play. I know there was talk, we're looking at some equipment, I call it exercise equipment, but there's some equipment that they can use for, I don't know if it's just for special needs, but for that population that's pretty simple out there that can keep kids, young adults busy to do. I just think there's a lot more we can do with that park to kind of freshen it up. So on the other side of that, I know we had somebody that worked at that park before, and he's no longer with us, even though he spent most of his time at the skate park. But I still think it'd be good to have a dedicated employee there that could actually promote the park and have events, instead of just saying we're going to have one event here and one event there. Really make it so everybody really knows we're having baseball on Thursday nights, or kickball tournaments for those kids, or soccer, or whatever you insert, and promote that. I mean, we're spending a lot of money having somebody just watch over the skate park. I think maybe it can be a little shared position, but just replacing that position doesn't quite seem like it's going to give the Field of Dreams its added attention that it needs. So I'd propose a person that's more dedicated to that side of the park, not just somebody that's has on their resume, I'm interested in special needs, but somebody that's maybe trained in that a little bit more. So I think we can obviously do a little bit more to promote that part of the park. Let's see. The other thing, let me see if there's anything else on that. We talk about parks as far as a master plan. I don't believe we have any parks north of 192. don't know if there's a place for one, but just an observation. And I don't think we have any parks planned for west of 95 when all that becomes developed for the community. If that's important to us, I don't know, but that's just an observation. And
I think for the west of 95, we worked to, in the Space Coast Town Center, to develop the town center plan to where that private pond, walking, jogging, biking, landscape edge, although private and privately maintained, would serve that public green space function. So I think Christie did a very good job in that master planning process to ensure that that vision is part of the Space Coast Town Center master plan. And now, as each parcel develops, we have to make sure that they construct their portion so that it, when it's ultimately built out, it completely encircles the pond and it serves that sort of public green space purpose.
yeah, and we still get a third of our money if a developer comes and wants to put a pool in their subdivision or condos. We're still using a lot of money for their private enterprise, but I still think we're giving them too much city money. So I think if we just had a little bit more money, maybe we can do more things.
Yeah, it's a lesser exaction. It's really private money that comes to the city under our ordinance.
Yes.
And
That's why we have that.
it's obviously up to the council to have how much that exaction should be. And so, for example, the big apartment complexes are coming in about 200,000, plus or minus, depending on the unit count and what they do. But that's up to the council if there's an interest in looking at that. I know we looked at that a couple of years ago, and we made it simpler, less subject to debate back and forth. And but if that's something the council would like us to look at, we could certainly do that.
Well, the point is, if we want money for all these parks and we're going to renovate them, we just need more money. And that's it. That's the place to get it without raising any taxes to do so. So again, what I'm saying is more equipment for the Field of Dreams area and a new position for that area to expand what the Field of Dreams is all about. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments or things. Deputy Mayor Young.
Yes, I think that's a great idea, and especially to utilize the park more for events and things like we used to have when we had Heritage Day, and we had chili cook-off, and the spring, and I think also in the fall, the events that were held at the PD, at the police department, which now they don't have the land that they had before, but those things could all be held at the park. And if we had that other person that is designated just for that position, they could help coordinate with the Parks and Rec Board, which when we decided to keep the Parks and Rec Board, that was one of the things that we wanted them to do, was to go back to having events. So there could be something, if there's anybody here from the Parks and Rec Board, that they might want to just put that on their little list of things to do, or maybe we could put it on their next meeting agenda to talk about that. But I agree, that's a good idea.
Mr. City Manager, so how do you see the Park and Rec Advisory Board mesh up with the company that you would hire to do a master plan?
How we did West Melbourne Community Park is we started with a focus group because we specifically wanted to get young mothers with very young children who would be using certain of the then envisioned play equipment when they were preschoolers and early school years, which we didn't have anybody on the Parks and Rec board that sort of fit that demographic. Then after that, we did go through the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, who advised the City Council on the elements that they thought should be in what's now West Melbourne Community Park. And then finally, it was the council's decision on what elements to include in the plan and what just wouldn't fit in. I think the consultant did a good job saying you can't put 100 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound potato sack. You have 18.8 acres, and you can only do so many things, and so you have to be selective. And each one of our parks has, limited area, limited opportunities, but there are opportunities to consider all these things and more at each park.
Right. Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. Early in the process, that was one of the questions that I had when I was looking at the parks plan, master plan, and if my memory serves me correct, it was we satisfied all of the regulatory requirements of green space within a certain parameter. So I think that's how, whether it's good or not, just because we hit all the numbers, on the regs doesn't mean that makes sense. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and I think that should be inclusive in this whole review that we're doing, is that let's not lose sight of that piece of it.
We could certainly ask the consultants to include a funding menu of where those kinds of future improvements could potentially come from. Now, there are some state grants that are available for these kinds of things, but again, I think the firm that we used before was Atkins. Again, we didn't really know where we were going to get $12 million, but we started in on it, and we were successful at the end. But I think that's a good idea to incorporate the ability for some additional funding, including the notion of taking another look at our developer contributions for public parks on a per capita basis of adding new people that demand more park space.
But I think if we're really serious about having the Parks and Rec board, I think they ought to get together with our Parks and Rec director first, so at least we have at least they can tell the consultant which direction to go instead of just, well, let me bring back some pretty pictures. I mean, I'm not sure what they all want, so they represent us, and
Yeah, I think what the value added that the landscape architect added was how much space each component takes. As I recall, there was a great concern about the park wasn't going to have enough parking. And so I think he correctly pointed out, well, you can have plenty of parking, but if you have no park for people to go to, you haven't accomplished the goal. So there are certain things that took very little space. The checkerboard square, very small, could fit, that flagpole area. Other, there was a long discussion at the final council meeting about a dog park being there, and the council said, no, we don't want to do that there. So I think that priority setting has to go through a process, an advisory process, until it gets to the council, who the council will make the final decisions on what the plan for each park should be.
yeah, I don't know, the cart before the horse or whatever, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And also including that should be the Powell House, what we're doing with that unused resource.
Very good. So in similar fashion, there was a fair amount of discussion about improved park maintenance. So we want to budget for, make sure there's enough money in the budget and actually perform improved maintenance of our parks. And the discussion at the last council workshop to include but not be limited to play equipment repair and replacement, ball field maintenance at Clements Wood Park, Field of Dreams play surface repairs, and replacement of the ceramic fixtures in the Westbrook Park restrooms with stainless steel fixtures. I think we could all think of other things as well. Some of those things we use outside contractor to perform, and some things we can do with our own in-house crews. But we certainly heard a great deal at the first workshop about the desire to just take what we have and maintain it better.
But I think that goes for the whole city, not just for that department. And I understand a lot of those things that we talked about last time were already in the works. It just weren't completed. I mean, they were in the process of maintaining some of those things, and then some of it just, getting supplies or whatever. So
one of the ones that had been long a desire of the council was the Clements Wood restroom. And we did the roof first, then we did the water supply line, then we let a contract for completely gutting it and replacing everything with new stainless steel fixtures that meet ADA. We just did the walkthrough this week. I think it turned out really good. It was in very bad shape. I think Councilmember Young remembers going through there and seeing that it had seen its best 30 years had gone by, and so we did that walkthrough today and think it turned out really, really well. The contractor did a good job, and Tom Bradford oversaw that contract, and so we can do those kinds of even major maintenance work by including those things in the budget and then making sure they happen. Next item is another sort of maintenance item. Right now, we do twice a year tree maintenance at I-95 and US 192 interchange, and so staff is suggesting that we double that and do that 4 times a year. So we have a near-term one that is going to be putting down mulch around all the trees and trimming up the trees, but mulching all.
Before I do that, I just see that our Steve Frampus has his hand up, and I didn't see that in the little corner, so he might be going back. Steve, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to back up to the senior center a little bit. I brought that up as a use for the Powell House. I wasn't necessarily thinking about a new senior community center being built as opposed to a better way to utilize the Powell House. So I don't know how we're looking at it in this plan, but when I brought it up, it was an actual use for property we already have, a better use for property we already have. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morgan, I think we've actually discussed this previously, but I kind of feel like I don't know, I've never gotten to where I want to get to. So I'm fine with doing actually 6 times a year at that I-95 to 192 exchange if we can get improvement. It seems to go down pretty fast after they, work on it. And I mean as much as picking up trash in that area as I do anything. If you drive along there, getting on the interstate, especially southbound, I mean, that's what I do mostly. That's horrific most of the time.
So I guess I'll have to put a question to the council in that regard, just so we all understand what our contractual obligation, when we took some grant money and we followed the state big, bold guidelines for landscaping, and we planted the trees, our obligation with FDOT is to maintain the trees, right? So the tree well and the trees themselves, the slopes, the grasses, the trash is still the state's responsibility. And staff has been a little loath to do more than a little bit around the edges and take away what the state is responsible for. Now, they've gone through a couple of, they don't do it with force account, they do it with contractors. But we try to get our contractor in there right after they've weed-eated and cleaned up so that we can get to the trees more easily without it being, hip high, because they do let those grasses really go. But just so everybody is, on the same page, our obligation is the trees, the state's obligation is the slopes and the grasses and the trash.
Well, I understand what you're saying. Regardless of who's owns it, it's not getting done. And it's a reflection on our city because it's what people see as they come and go right from our city. So I understand that we can say, well, that's a state responsibility, but it reflects on West Melbourne. So I don't care whose responsibility it is. If we don't own it, the state has proven, I think, that they're not going to own it. So.
And we sort of did this with, you probably remember the fights we had for years with the county about the Minton median and swale maintenance. And finally, I think the council's frustration got so great that they said, look, we'll do it at largely our expense. And we've been doing it, and I think the county was a little embarrassed when they said, well, what's our frequency? How much are we spending? And it was a pittance, but that's why it was looking so ragged. So we've done this before. That is a decision that, staff wouldn't make on our own. If the council wanted us to talk to the state about assuming more responsibility, then we would certainly seek at least some reimbursement, because we do get some partial reimbursement for our maintenance of the 192 medians and the grass between the curb and the sidewalk. We do that with a contractor. We don't get fully reimbursed, but we get partially reimbursed. So if the council wanted us to pursue discussion with the state and take on more formal responsibility, that would be, we would really want council direction to do that. It's not something we would, it's an expense of the city that's not our responsibility, but if the council wants us to pursue that, obviously we have to come back to the council with a proposed agreement, and then you'd have to judge if it's a fair compensation for taking on all that additional responsibility, but we certainly could do that.
Have you really, I'm sure you have, taken a look at that fence line along Brandywine and the on-ramp to I-95 southbound? It's just complete, almost
Yes.
a wall of trash, papers, almost all the time. I've even almost thought about, I wonder if I'm allowed to actually just do this myself. But I know it would only last a few weeks, because there's so much people. But it reflects on our city. I have people complain about it all the time, but it's, we've had that discussion. It's, and I understand maybe you can get some money from the state, but I think they've shown that they're not going to maintain it.
Well, and from time to time, we have had in the past some success in getting the sheriff's inmate crew coming and doing the sweep of a particular area that's bad, and if they do that a couple of times, then
We get them to do that once a month.
yeah, it seems to be better. So that's another possibility for where it's just people littering and it just piles up, and
Maybe we
because
could
it's
get them
near
to
the
do that
interstate.
once a month or something.
We can certainly put that to the sheriff's office and see if they'd be willing to do that. Again, it's primarily serving an unincorporated community there, and
I understand.
I would think they would want to do that.
Maybe we could even get Brandywine to help out. Also, same caveat that we've talked about this previously. I was just down in Boca to visit my daughter, and some of the, I would love us to do something with the 192. And I get you got to get all these permissions from these different people, and I get that we don't have water there. But I just think we could do a much better job of beautifying that with some type of plants and small trees.
Where?
Along the 192 corridor. That, to me, it's not a great entrance to the city. And I've looked at other cities in Florida, so that we, won't say that, well, it's up north and they have a different kind of tree. Yeah, I get that. But I just think we could do so much more with the looks of coming into the city along 192.
And I think we have a reasonable near-term possibility there. FDOT is starting to plan a pavement maintenance project from just west of the interstate all the way through West Melbourne and into Melbourne. And one of the things we told them was we see that there are people that cross 192 not at a signalized intersection in the crosswalk. And the state is very safety oriented now, and they're it's their target is 0 pedestrian fatalities. And so our suggestion to them is that they landscape that area where people are crossing on foot to greatly discourage people and funnel them to the crosswalks. That serves two purposes. One, it beautifies that area, but two, it reduces dangerous pedestrian behavior. So I think we've got them somewhat interested in that. So we'll see if we can't pursue that. It certainly makes it, if it's their project, our experience has been it's tended to be better than when it's our project and they're the regulator. That gets tough, and we get a lot of different opinions from different divisions. If it's their project, they sort of cut through the different divisions to get it done. So I think we have a decent chance to do that.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Deputy Mayor Young?
I just wanted to add to that. I know that there was an issue that in order to work on the 95 and 192, that we have to have people who are FDOT approved, but is that just for the top of the bank where they work right next to the highway? In the bottom part of the bank, and that the ramp, I'm usually going north when I get on 95. Rarely do I ever go south, but north is just, again, it's a steady stream
Yeah,
of
the
just
landscape
trash.
contractor we use is, whether he's up on the top with the palms right at the very top, or down the slope to the bench, or below the bench, or in the flatter area, the contractor has that licensure.
Okay, but
we
our guys
use.
do some things down on the flat part, don't they, on the part that's not part of the bank, maybe where the buttonwoods are, which have greatly improved. Thank you very, very much. Don't our guys do that? And then
Yes, we're able to reach that, and then that's also the area where FDOT's contractors, I'll say more frequently mowed. It wasn't frequent enough, but because it's easier to mow there, they would. The slopes are very hard once they get sort of high with grass. But yes, those lower reaches are easier to work.
all right, but the ramp, now when you're actually driving on the ramp and you're picking up speed, that entire thing, before it actually gets next to 95, that is just a line of trash the entire way. People are increasing their speed there. So now, even though it is the flat part, it's still right next to the roadway. And I certainly wouldn't want
Yeah,
well, I
when
don't
our
want anybody
crews
in
work
danger.
there, we make sure they pull well off and they use the vehicles as sort of defense. So when we're in that low area, we make sure that have their head on a swivel, and that's why we exited the business. We used to have city employees do the median maintenance in 192, where people are going 50 miles an hour right next to where our mowers were. We saw that as too big a risk for our own employees, and so we ended up with a contractor to do that work. And so I hear what you're saying, and that's why we also use a FDOT certified landscape maintenance contractor to do the work that we have them do.
Okay, and then I just wanted to mention that we have 2 exchanges to maintain, because we have the one at Ellis Road as well.
But we don't have any responsibility for that.
Well, but we don't have the responsibility for the one here either. You said it's...
Well, we by our agreement, for the grant agreement that we were able to get dollars to plant the trees, we are obligated to maintain the trees at 192 and 95.
Okay, but the rest of it, you just said that they have to mow that. So it would be the same with the one at Ellis, but then if they don't, then we have the same issue. May not be our responsibility, but it reflects on West Melbourne, same point. So I guess I haven't used that one. I don't use that as an entrance or exit very often, so I don't know what it looks like at the moment, but it's just, we hadn't mentioned it, so I just want to make sure that gets on the list of exchanges to maintain. That's all.
Now, our southern interchange, the city of Palm Bay is under contract to maintain the Palm Bay Road and I-95 landscaping that was installed as part of that project. So they are the ones that are obligated to do our southern interchange.
And that seems to be okay whenever I've seen it. It's got the big Palm Bay and rock or something out there.
Yes,
Oh, it's Southwest Melbourne, actually, but it's too many letters. All right, thank you.
Southwest.
Mr. Ditmore?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Councilmember Bentley for bringing this. It's like we brought this up, before about the trash along the roadways, trash on 95. As people as they pass through the city here, and it's just horrendous. And then all the crews just run the mowers over top of it, and they just try to turn it into mulch, and it doesn't really work out too well. So, I think that, we talk about adding these, even I'm looking at some stuff that's on the agenda about adding additional boards and all these different things. I think a priority that we need to really focus on is what we can do to make the city look good. And if that means picking up the phone and calling down south and saying, how do you guys do this if we're not sure how it happens? But I have too traveled down to Boca and some of these places, and you get off the highways there and they're beautiful. And if it's cost prohibitive, and we can talk about that, but I don't understand why some of these other communities can do that and we can't. And I understand, like, in part of 192, we don't own some of those areas as we're coming through to the city, but it's not real attractive, and I would support anything that we can do to do what we can to make that look better.
As you recall, 192, we used to have landscaped on there because it had water and everything. And in fact, there's still some trees and bushes left over from that. So, but I guess that went by the wayside. As far as having our workers on I-95 blocked by a truck and some fences or whatever you said, that doesn't seem like a secure plan. I don't know what the right plan is, but that doesn't. I know that they just trimmed those trees not that long ago. Is that correct? And they cleaned all that up? How long ago did they trim all those trees?
I'll guess 6 months, because we're just about ready to go and mulch all and trim the ones we didn't trim 6 months.
I thought it was really recently. They were trimmed quite, yeah. And what's happening is I don't see a whole lot of beauty. It's just a lot of trees, regardless of if it's mowed or not. So I don't know what the answer is, whether maybe you put ground cover there, like some of the places I see on 95, because I look at that all the time now, as opposed to just grass. But there's just a bunch of trees. There's no pattern. There's not any beauty, I don't think. They're just trees. And I know when you said they sold you on a package of more is better, more trees. This is the only island probably in Florida that has this many trees in that small area. I don't know what the answer is, but there's just a lot to do there.
Well, I guess strategically, we could seek to exit our agreement with FDOT and turn it entirely back over to them, or we could go the 180 degrees the other direction, saying, look, you're not doing very well with your part. What would you pay us to take over your responsibility to try to make it what we want to make it? And we've been sort of in this in-between, and that hasn't been satisfactory. So I think we're just looking for some direction on, if we're willing to take some of our local money and take on a state responsibility that they should be doing. We've done that with the county, with the median in Minton, and I think it's a lot better than it ever was when the county was doing it.
Yes, it definitely is. Again, I've never heard anybody say how nice it looks. Or it doesn't even look adequate. But cleaning it up, I don't know that it looks better, except the trash is gone for a day or two, like you say, because everybody's dumping there. What does it cost us for 2 extra times when they come out there? Ballpark? Wait, can you come up? Because he has to hear you by remote.
Yeah.
The 420 some palm trees, they will be all hit with herbicide, and all the tree rings will be mulched first week of May. That's going to be $20-some thousand.
20-something thousand.
21,000, possibly, because we're going to try and get all of the invasive pepper trees that are now 5 or 6 feet high that the robo-mower, that the third-party company comes in with, $100,000 robo-mowers, because the slopes, won't touch those pepper trees.
Yeah.
Now the stump, now their actual trunks are this big around. They go around the pepper trees and then go down. So you got all these little clumps of green invasive pepper trees that are growing all over. Can you hear me, Mr. Frampus?
When you're talking to the mic.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
And now,
All right, sorry about that. So those pepper trees, they're weaving around them. So now we have 5 or 6 foot pepper trees growing, and they're going to continue to grow. So then you get down to the bottom, and like you say, there's an array of different buttonwoods that are there. We keep them trimmed up, but there is constantly garbage all the time. Anything that's within grasp that we can get on the flats. If you notice, the flats themselves are pretty garbage free, because we will pick up tires, railroad ties, basically, pallets, anything that happens to be left there, unless it's something we need to forensically report. And then the rest is just all your on-ramps and off-ramps, which again, cars are zooming on, zooming off, and they get cluttered with garbage constantly. But the top area and all that stuff that's going to be done will be, I think there's like the quote is around, it's between 12.5 and 20 because I'm getting them to do some extra stuff as well. I want to get rid of all those green pepper trees.
Well, let's just say 20,000 every time they.
Well,
make an
yeah,
appearance.
you're
Roughly.
not far off that. Yeah, and we're trying to do that a couple times a year minimum. That's in the budget right now.
And as far as your people going out to do stuff, what do you do for safety? Do you wear orange vest or just say stop?
Vests, we have strobes on the truck, and kind of what Mr. Morgan said, you hide behind the truck, and oh, that's good.
And do a lot of praying. Okay.
Well, that's if they're anywhere near the actual ramp. I don't want them up on the top. I don't want them stopping a truck on 95 itself. And that's what the third-party company that we contract with come in with the 50-foot lifts. They have to trim those trees from actually on I-95.
Oh, wow.
So those top rows of trees on all four of the on-ramps, off-ramps, they are done with a 50-foot lift on I-95. Then they weave their way down and get down there's like 4 levels of those trees. So they get as low as they can off 95. Then they'll come into the actual ground. And if it isn't soggy, wet, soaking wet, or whatever when they're doing it, then they'll do the lower levels as well.
And those are all palm trees?
all palm trees.
So why do we need to even trim some of those palm trees? Because a lot of people, they just say they're natural, and when it's time for the thing to fall off, they do. And
They're brown hanging clumps of ugly palm branches all over the place on the trees. And strong winds even don't take them off half the time. They look ugly. They're horrible. They're Washingtonian palms.
oh, Washingtonian, okay, yeah. All right, thanks.
Attractive.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, I think for me closing this out, I'm willing as a single vote up here to spend more money on beautification of the city. And I think that's part of this. I think we're talking about the same thing with parks as well, even though that goes a little further. But I don't want to be the one that tells you how to get it done. I mean, as far as whether we should use the state, whether we should use the police, not the police, but the prisoners, or whether, we should do it ourselves. I mean, you need to tell us what the right answer is, because I'm no tree expert. You don't want me probably drawing out the landscape for your house. My wife I don't touch that subject because it's just not something I'm good at. And so I want you to tell us how we can make these areas better, and then I think the majority of the council might be willing to pay some money to do these things, to make the 192 corridor better, to fix the trash around there. I don't know what the right answer is, but you're the expert, or at least responsible for the city's perspective. Tell me what you need from us, and then see if we can't come to an agreement. Thank you, Mr. Morgan and Mr. Rose.
Thank you.
All right, good discussion. One of the other items the council is very interested in is our fire alternative study. Our assistant city manager, Tim Rohde, is leading that on the staff side. On the consultant side, they have a really good team making good progress. We're still looking for a summertime conclusion. And from the workshop last time, there was some discussion depending on the results of that study and the council's direction, to start some implementation. And the explicit discussion was about the potential for selecting and possibly purchasing property. So we want to make sure that priority of the council is addressed in the budget.
I'd like to see the report first, what they bring back, and see what we need,
Okay.
if anything.
One of the other items mentioned was to create a new sustainability advisory board. You have a report on your regular action item that our planning intern, Malia, worked on so diligently, and here's a discussion that came up at the last workshop for that.
Mr. Ditmore?
Yeah, I'd like to see if we could table that till after tonight's meeting, because we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about that report and its contents. So if we can maybe table this till that portion till the next budget meeting, to have a little bit more healthier discussion on it, if all possible. I think we'll get through it when we get through tonight's, when we get to that item on the agenda.
All right. It's not a motion, no. There's no cost to have a board, though, is there?
Well, there's always a cost in staff time, you know, it's an opportunity cost of whatever is supporting the board against other activities that the same staff would be.
It doesn't change the budget. I got you.
Doesn't have to change the budget, no, sir.
Okay.
One of the other items discussed was council chamber upgrades. So there were some suggestions as to lighting and audiovisual improvements, and I think the most significant critique that's been going on for a long time is the return air right behind the dais. When it kicks on, it's very loud, kind of disturbs the meeting. When we did the council chamber renovation, the budget didn't allow for changing the location of the return air through a concrete wall. But if the council's interested in us looking at how we might otherwise deal with the HVAC in here on a significant budgetary basis, we certainly can get some concepts from some architects that could suggest how we could replace that return air that's objectionable.
I don't know about that, but I like to see some of these lights, as you see, are kind of falling. Be careful it doesn't fall on your head, Chief, because that light, some of these are not, these are so old, their clips are broken and that kind of stuff. So I like to see even the ceiling painted white like it used to be years ago, and maybe some new fixtures just to freshen it up a little bit. But,
all right, so.
Deputy Mayor Young?
Yes, I think I mentioned this last time. Since we don't use this room for council chambers but twice a month, and then we have some board meetings, which also are about once a month or once every other month, since we're building the new building across the street anyway, would there not be room to have a meeting for us a few times a month over there and just vacate this building altogether and let it be part of the VMC? This could probably be cut in thirds or quarters and be moved, well, I don't know if you could get it through the doors, and reassembled across the street. Is that a possibility at all?
Back in 2009, the upstairs of what's currently City Hall was initially planned by the council to be the Parks and Recreation Department and a new council chambers. It wouldn't be as large as our current council chambers. So I guess the question for that is, what kind of budget would you envision, and would you want a smaller council chambers, or is this considered to be, you know, a minimum size for a community the size of West Melbourne in terms of a council chambers? I think the reason why the council moved away from that plan when I got here and suggested that it'd be better to move City Hall over there, keep Park and Rec here, and keep the council chambers. A, it's larger. B, it's the most expensive space. But it's also to integrate all the city facilities in one place. And so that's what the council did. Obviously, you could change that plan going forward if you wanted a new council chambers. We would probably need to spend a fair amount of time with some space planners and several workshops. I think you probably remember how long it took us to sort of get through the decision making for the renovation of this chamber. That requires a significant amount of planning and concurrence by the council to decide that's what we want it to be. So, of course, it's a possibility, but I think it needs a good deal of structure in planning, and I think you, kind of like the park master plan, I think you need an architect that's done city municipal buildings to help guide the council so that decision-making can be made all along, so that you don't get to the end and go, that's not what we wanted.
I can certainly understand that. With all the meetings that I go to every month with the TDC and the TPO and all the other meetings that I go to, this is the only one where there's an elevated dais like this. Maybe we don't need this configuration. Maybe something much simpler would work. I haven't looked. Maybe to see something that's more modern than this traditional idea of the raised council dais. So just want to throw that out there. If we're going to be looking at different ideas, which we're probably going to have to do this at some point. I mean, this building isn't getting any younger. We keep putting Band-Aids on it as it is. So maybe we should look at it sooner rather than later and see what it takes. That's
Thank
my
you.
comment.
Mr. Ditmore?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a quick comment on the elevated dais. They have it, I've seen it in Melbourne and at the county. I think I don't like looking down on anybody, but I think what it is, I think it allows the people in the audience to easier see us. If we were lower, it might make it a little bit more difficult. So, you know, I just wanted to make that comment. I've just about every government councils, whoever I've seen before in the past, it's always been a little bit higher. I just think it's more for the crowd to see us. That's all. I don't think it's, you know, demeaning or anything. But as far as the building across the street, is that going to be? Do we decide if that's going to be one floor or two floors yet?
I don't think that decision's been made.
Okay, all right. So I mean, it's you know, a second floor dedicated just for meetings, for whatever, probably wouldn't be a bad idea. And then it would get us across the street over the way to where we're at over at City Hall. Wouldn't really, you know, it's easier to go up than go across, but I wouldn't be opposed to that. And then all the functions in the Veteran Center could be, you know, for the public functions that we need for the public to have. Different things, you know, events and so forth that could use this over here. But I would support something like that, but maybe just looking into it a little bit further, that's all.
Thank you. For the record, I have my seat up all the way so I can see over the thing here. But I haven't really thought about that enough, but there's some merit of going across the street and having it on the second floor. And I think, just like Mr. Ditmore said, we do use it more than twice a month. We have our meeting, P&Z has their meetings, all the boards have their meetings, so it's used quite a bit. This might make the perfect, the senior citizen room, because it's pretty large, and maybe this could house a lot of big organizations kind of thing, especially if we incorporate it. So that's kind of a thought with that, but maybe you need to incorporate this with your master program planning for city services as far as Parks and Rec, if we did incorporate that. So,
yeah, obviously this is not only our recreation offices, council chamber, where we have some recreation events, but it's also our park. We would certainly look at this site, and if you want to have some building plans as part of that plan, I'm sure Atkins is probably deep enough. I know they have architects on their team, not just planners and engineers and landscape architects. I know they've actually got building architects on their team as well. So that would probably be a good idea to try to incorporate the master plan for this site as well, as part of a larger scope of services than what I think we were sort of talking about 2 weeks ago, but I think it's a good idea.
okay. Next.
Yeah, I think that was the last, sorry, Henry Avenue guardrail. This one's sort of an easy one. It's included in the current water main replacement plans. The reason why we have a gap there is the only place you could put a guardrail is where there's a water main, and until we abandon that water main, we can't anchor a guardrail there, but we want to do that. And then the last item that was discussed was, I think it was the mayor said would want to try to have the budget with the same number of personnel in the manager's office as current.
Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morgan, I'd also like to see us maybe do the school cross lightings at the same time we do the Henry Road work. I don't know when that is, but I'd hope we were going to budget something toward making some of those crosswalks lit instead of just reflective paint on the ground off of Henry. And you and I had sent an email back and forth.
Yeah, so I think what Councilmember Bentley is talking about, if you're familiar with the crosswalk from Buena Vita into the public center, we put in pavement LED flashers so that when a pedestrian wants to cross, they push the crosswalk and drivers are alerted in pavement that there's a pedestrian crossing. And so I think Councilmember Bentley is talking about the opportunity to do that along Henry, to do some of that. And again, the best timing is with pavement maintenance, but you can also do that. When we did that on Doherty, it was outside of that cycle because we'd had a pedestrian fatality. And there was a desire to do that quickly. And then the Buena Vita Foundation donated the money to the city to install that. So that was at no city cost. We did that one. But they're pretty effective. And I think the application on Henry is probably a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's for the school crossings there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the crosswalks for across Henry where there's no sidewalk on the north side, because there can't be because of the Melbourne-Tillman Canal, the sidewalk, an asphalt sidewalk, but a sidewalk's on the south side, and people on the north side to safely walk, jog, bike have to cross Henry. And so I think what Councilmember Bentley's talking about is the in-pavement LED push-button
I don't think he was.
flashers that,
No, I was. Is that what you're talking about, Mayor?
you know,
Well, the problem I think that I'm hearing from folks that live in these areas is that especially in the mornings, but it's afternoons as well, people are staring into the sun when they're going that direction, and they don't necessarily see an unlit up in any way crosswalk. So those kids are at risk crossing, and they're saying we need something to get people's attention. And I don't know what the right answer there, but they had mentioned the thing over by Buena Vita.
and I think that was a successful application. I had done that a couple places in Northern California where I was the manager before here. And even in the bright sunlight, those LED in pavement are very visible as opposed to some of the other warning things. We've found those to be pretty visible even going into a sun, that's low on the horizon. They pop out, those in-pavement LEDs.
So I didn't know if you need to have that as part of our budget.
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion because I think as I communicate with you, I think it's a good idea. They're not horribly expensive, but if they can prevent one tragic accident, they're absolutely worth it.
Now, I had that in my notes too, but I really dislike those ones on the road. People didn't see those at all at Buena Vita. In fact, I guess they didn't see them because you put on the signs on the side where it says pedestrian crossing, where the triangle is, or the diamond shape, you have, when that lights up, that pops and people see it. But down in the bottom of the road, people aren't used to looking at that.
You can do both. It isn't the best application. Our engineer that designed that, I wasn't happy with the application. But yes, you can do both. You can do it on the signage and you can do it in the pavement. But I think because this is an east-west roadway and there is a low sun on the horizon in the morning if you're traveling eastbound, the proper engineering application may well be both.
I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah, but that's where you want a registered civil, we can talk about this here at a workshop, but that's where you want stamped and sealed, that it meets sort of state standards for that kind of application. It's not one to sort of be making it up on our own.
But I would say that my goal was to, around the city, we have areas that a lot of people cross, certain more than others, and have that as a goal to keep putting those signs up, just like you have on A1A. Somebody presses the button, it doesn't mean stop, but it alerts people that it's there. In fact, on Riverside Drive, what they do, and it might be good over here for kids crossing, is they have these orange little flags on both sides. So you push the button, it lights up, and you carry the orange flag to the other side of the road and put it in a little holder. And they go back, they do that. It just, again, we...
FDOT has done that in some locations, so I think we get the goal of the council to try to include some of those in the upcoming budget, and
On Wingate as well. I mean, there's a lot of, wherever the school, and not only school crossing, we have other places that there's a lot of people that cross, I believe. So, all right. Ms. Young, I'm sorry.
Yes, and I just wanted to mention while we're on that topic that crosswalks are a big hot topic at TPO. I'm sure you know that. And you see that the crosswalks are being changed on A1A from the old ones. Well, they were actually new old ones because they've come up with this new type of crosswalk altogether, and I can't think of the name of it right now. But the crosswalks are a big deal, so I can bring that information to you. You may already have it from being at the other TPO.
And I think it's one where we want our applications to be designed by a registered civil engineer for each particular application using state standards. I think that's, if we start trying to be a design team of non-engineers, we run some risk there as opposed to having a registered civil engineer prepare those kinds of plans.
And I know that there are grants available too. I mean, this Vision Zero is pretty big, and there's grants for crosswalks. So
We would certainly go after those.
But the reason I have my light on is since it's budget time, and this is the time to talk about sidewalks. I know I was in your office, we talked about sidewalks. I know you're going to be looking at those, but I had a call today just before I came here from Manchester Lakes regarding Durham Drive. So can you please add Durham Drive into the sidewalk repair? It was lifting. It wasn't broken. It was lifting. And I know we have our road repairs on a rotation basis. Do we have sidewalk repair on rotation as well?
We don't have a multi-year plan for sidewalk. We treat those as calls come in from citizens in particular neighborhoods and perform an appropriate. Sometimes it's grinding down. Sometimes it's, removing and replacement of sections. It just, we're more reliant on a citizen calls it in basis than unlike the pavement maintenance, which we do on a multi-year plan basis. We don't have a multi-year sidewalk repair plan.
Well, maybe that's something we can put in the Friday report. If your neighborhood has crumbling or sidewalks in need of repair, please call us and let us know. Maybe they don't know to do that, so maybe we could have some resident education and let them know to call.
We've done,
Call me.
each year we do some. One of the neighborhoods that's requested consideration in this upcoming year budget is Pine Needle off of Sheridan. They've got some pretty large native pines fairly close to the sidewalks. It's kind of a unique application in the neighborhood. So we do from time to time hear from neighborhoods that want us to address sidewalk maintenance.
Okay, thank you. And my last item is I mentioned street sweepers at our last meeting, and they're too big and too expensive, and we have a company that does it for us, so that was it. Okay, but the reports that I get from neighborhoods that don't have any curbing at all, like Palm Lake Estates and Hollywood, they have no curbing. They don't even have Miami curbing. In other subdivisions, like your subdivision, yours, mine, we have Miami curbing, and that's not really a curb anyway. So they're still not working at optimum efficiency of the street sweeper. We just kind of have to take what we get because that's the best they can do with what we have and with what their trucks do, the angle of the broom. So when I lived up north and back in the olden days, they have sidewalk sweepers for snow, and they're not very big, maybe a little bigger than a golf cart, but they have a roller brush in the front, and they go down the sidewalks, and it sweeps up the snow. Could we not get something close to that if that's not what it is? And we
I think
could do
Mr.
that.
Rhodey probably can get one of those snow sidewalk removals for us at a good discount.
But we have so many of our roads. I mean, that would be fine if we didn't have so much Miami curbing. We have subdivision after subdivision that is only Miami curbing. So those golf carts sidewalk sweepers would be out all the time for that. We need either a company that can accommodate Miami curbing or no curbing at all, or maybe we need to do in-house and pick up like Hollywood Estates, Palm Lake Estates, those with no curbing whatsoever, because they don't even get half of the usage that we have with Miami curbing. At least we get a halfway of it done, but they get nothing. So maybe that's something we could think about if we're not going to have our own street sweepers and have the brushes that are movable.
Yeah, I don't know where we are in our multi-year contract with our contract street sweeper operator, but I do believe that's the right mechanism for us in terms of make or buy. I think buying street sweeping is very appropriate for West Melbourne and our community. Now, we do, just as a reminder, I know the council knows, but citizens may or may not know that even in our private gated communities, if a homeowner association asks us to sweep, we will. They sign an agreement. So if Hollywood Estates, those are public streets, to request us to add, now the question becomes, how good is the job when the job can only be as good as it can be? It's better than nothing, and it does pick up, but I get that what gets left over is the sand that gets brought in by cars, tires, and collects in the lowest places where water runs down a street. But the street sweeper will pick up some of that.
Some of that, right. And the company we have now, is that the company we've always had?
It's been sold, but yes, and we still have very favorable rates from them, which is really good compared to our neighboring cities that have more streets to sweep, and we sort of end up while they're in the area, they do us because we're a lot smaller than the neighbors, and so, but I'm going to say, I don't know where Mark is, but we're maybe in year 2 of a 3-year contract, but we'll look at, possibly changing that service with our next RFQ.
Or maybe they just have different trucks for different things, because they may not have curbs, but they do have dirt, and they're asking to be done as well. There's just too much to be able to go out there by hand and sweep up a little pile of dirt. They would do that on their own. I mean, the residents that are calling me that want their street sweep, they said that originally when we first started doing street sweeping, that a street sweeper would go through there, but apparently they don't now. If they don't have curbs at all, just flat, everything.
Well, our contract does provide a per mile basis for added mileage. So last time when we approved the contract, there's a base route that we pay for, and then each additional mile of street sweeping cost a fixed amount. So again, we did that because we know that there are areas that want to be added to that list, and the council policy has been to allow neighborhoods to be added to the list at their request. And that's why we have the contract structured like we do, to have, if we do additions, it's on a per mile basis.
All right, but all of the city streets are already included. They're not added. Like, we don't have to add Hollywood Estates. They're already public streets.
Correct.
Right, correct?
Yeah, but I think you're telling me that we're not sweeping Hollywood Estates. I don't know that we are or aren't. I mean, you have more information about whether we're doing that than I do.
Well, I know that they're doing my subdivision, but I don't always see them. But I know they're there.
Yes.
So they may be in Hollywood Estates too, and the
Okay.
people that are telling me just aren't seeing them.
Okay.
But from what I can see, it doesn't look like.
I suspect that we are, because it's public street, and the council made a policy determination to extend the street sweeping into public streets that didn't have curb. That was a policy decision some time ago, and so we did. So my belief is that Hollywood Estate is being, but I'd have to look at our contract, the base contract for the mileage and what streets are part of that contract.
All right, thank you.
All right. As we kind of wind down this budget process, and I had a couple things I just want to put, as long as you're adding bullets to your other list of things. Obviously, the purpose of a lot of this is what can we do to improve our citizens' life in West Melbourne. And one of the things is traffic. Traffic is always a big concern. So maybe we need to look at what can we do with some traffic issues, whether that means money into improving some intersections so it flows a little better. I mean, it's not up to the city to 6-lane Minton or Hollywood. We don't own those roads, but maybe there's some intersections that we can improve or to get traffic flowing better. So that's just one thought. I don't know where that would be exactly. I know on one of our things we're extending some turn lanes on North Fork Parkway. Those kind of things I believe should be a goal of the council.
And one of those that came up as a request, and our civil engineer is looking at it, that they should be getting close to it, is the intersection of Norfolk Parkway and Shallow Creek. So we should have that engineering report within 6 or 8 weeks, I would think. They're working on that, but that was one that the council did direct specifically. And we would have to include that in the budget for whatever the engineering solution that the council approves.
Another thing, I think it would be good to look at some of our codes and ordinances that are maybe old or outdated. One of the things I don't like is, besides too many apartments coming in our city, is all the apartments, I see them smiling out there, that all these apartments are all wood constructed, including the elevator shaft. And I see a lot of cities require at least a concrete elevator shaft for safety reasons if there's a fire. So I like to see some of our codes looked at, not just that, but whether we're going to include street lights, accessibility in new subdivisions, single family or otherwise, whether we require some sort of safety in as far as surveillance cameras or something like that in commercial establishments. I think that would help the police and everybody else as far as if there's issues as part of a code to look at. So those are just some of the things that maybe we can improve on. Other things is the Jacobs building that does our water and sewer plant. That building was built in the 50s as an old house, and I know you know that, and they even took out all their closets and made offices out of those, and it's pretty embarrassing to have one of our contractors work out of that.
Yeah, one of the opportunities we have there, of course, is the water plant building, which can be more than office space for water plant workers. We have sort of unlimited opportunity to make that space what it needs to be.
In 2026 or 7?
Before 2026.
Okay.
Required to flip the switch. So the building will be built before we flip the switch for sure.
If needed, we might want to consider conversion of something over there or bringing in some temporary trailers, modular for offices to help them if they need. I don't know what they need. I just saw the place and it's bad. I guess it's worse than bad, and you know that, but what can we do as far as budgetary to help that situation?
Yeah, I think it's hang on and make sure we do it right at the water plant.
Well, it definitely needs it then. All right. Anyone else? Okay. All right, well, Mr. Richardson.
I just have real quick information on 2 items that you discussed. First of all, with regard to the park recreation fee, this is the year for that to be revisited. It's built into the ordinance that there's reconsideration within every 4-year period, so I'll be bringing that probably 2 or 3 meetings out from now. And then with regard to the street sweeping, yes, Ruth, Jean, Marnie, all of those Hollywood Estates streets are included in the contract. We did just exercise the first of 3 one-year renewal terms, effective April 1. But there is an easy out for the city, a termination for convenience clause with 30 days written notice, and that become something we wanted to do. But we did just exercise that first renewal term with 2 more one-year options after that expires.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. That concludes the budget hearing. We'll take a 5-minute break and start the council meeting very shortly.